Madam Administrator, I've listened to you here for almost an hour telling us how bad fentanyl is. Thank you for that, but we know.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you a third time. If President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with the same in Mexico, we could stop the cartels. Isn't that a fact?
So, Senator, I can speak to the law enforcement side of this, and you just mentioned law enforcement. I believe that this is vital for both Mexico and the United States. Mexicans are dying as well, as we showed in the Chapito.
Well, then why don't we stop them?
So
would it help? Let me ask you a fourth time. Would it help if President Lopez Obrador, I don't think it's a complicated question, Madam Administrator. You're asking us for more money every year, more money, and it gets worse, worse, and worse.
Okay, did you just see that? Because I need a second. What you just watched is one of the most honest moments I have seen come out of Washington in a long time. Senator John Kennedy sitting across from the DEA Administrator, doing something almost nobody in that building has the spine to do anymore. He asked a simple, direct question and refused to let her dodge it. Before we watch the full video, I want you to keep one thing in mind. Ask yourself, is he wrong? Because everything Kennedy is saying, whether you like his style or not, is grounded in logic, in real numbers, and in the pain of families who have actually lost someone to fentanyl. If this kind of content makes you think, hit subscribe because we do this every week. Drop a comment below and tell me what you thought of that clip. Let's get into the full thing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Administrator, the two cartels that are sending fentanyl into the United States are located in Mexico, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it a fact that we could stop those cartels in their tracks if President Lopez Obrador would invite American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with his military and law enforcement personnel?
Senator, what I would say from my purview as the head of the DEA...
But is my statement true or not?
What I would say is that we're focused on the two cartels, who we believe are doing exactly what you say. They are responsible for the fentanyl coming.
Let me ask you again. If President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or American law enforcement officials to come into Mexico to work with the same in Mexico, we could stop the cartels, could we not?
Senator, I believe this is a whole of government effort and has to be, including whether it's the military, us, FBI, and others.
Madam Administrator, I've listened to you here for almost an hour telling us how bad fentanyl is. Thank you for that, but we know.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you a third time. If President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with the same in Mexico, we could stop the cartels. Isn't that a fact?
So, Senator, I can speak to the law enforcement side of this, and you just mentioned law enforcement. I believe that this is vital for both Mexico and the United States. Mexicans are dying as well, as we showed in the Chapito.
Well, then why don't we stop them?
So
would it help? Let me ask you a fourth time. Would it help if President Lopez Obrador, I don't think it's a complicated question, Madam Administrator. You're asking us for more money every year, more money, and it gets worse, worse, and worse. You know, in the real world, the nitty-gritty of the real world, when you fail, you get fired. In government, when you fail, you get more money because obviously you need it. Now, let me ask you a fourth time. If President Lopez Obrador, and I'd appreciate an answer, if President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with his, we could stop the cartels, couldn't we?
I believe, Senator, that we can stop the cartels.
Okay. Have you made that suggestion to President Biden?
If I could, I believe that we can stop the cartels by...
Have you made that suggestion to President Biden?
Senator, I have been very vocal in the whole of government setting on the importance of fentanyl and all of us using every single effort and authority that we have.
Why hasn't President Biden done it? I mean, this is the way the American people whose sons and daughters are dying. Look at it. Our economy is $23 trillion. Mexico's economy is $1.3 trillion. Ours is 18 times bigger. We buy $400 billion every year from Mexico. Without the people of America, Mexico, figuratively speaking, would be eating cat food out of a can and living in a tent behind an outback. So why don't you and the president, embarrassing no one, get on the phone and call President Lopez Obrador and make him a deal he can't refuse to allow our military and our law enforcement officials to go into Mexico and work with his to stop the cartels? Why don't you do that?
Senator, what I am doing every single day is working with the incredible men and women of DEA who are risking their lives across 334 offices worldwide.
And I appreciate that, but you're not doing what would work. Why won't you do what will work?
Senator,
why don't you call the president this afternoon and say, Mr. President, let's call President Lopez Obrador privately and make him a deal he can't refuse. Because we both know that President Lopez Obrador has neither the ability nor the will to stop the cartels. But yet we go along and pretend that they're our friends, and Mexico is our friend. But he has criminal organizations that are killing our people, and you know how to stop it, and the president does, and you're not doing it.
Senator, we are working every day to stop it.
But you're not doing what would stop it.
We are transforming, and we are working in countless ways across the globe to do what needs to be done for the American people. And there is nothing that the men and
when
women...
it's important to you, you make it happen. When it's not important to you, you make an excuse.
All right, we've seen the whole thing. I have thoughts. Senator Kennedy is not a perfect politician, nobody is, but what he did in that hearing room was not theater. That was a man doing his job, representing people who are burying their kids because of fentanyl and demanding real answers. I respect that. So here is what actually happened. Kennedy asked the DEA Administrator the same question 4 times. If President Lopez Obrador invited American military and law enforcement into Mexico to work alongside Mexican forces, could we stop the cartels? That is it. Yes or no. And she could not give him a straight answer. Not once. This is not a complicated question. And the fact that the head of drug enforcement in this country cannot answer it directly tells you a lot about how seriously this is being treated. Kennedy also made a point that I think people are completely sleeping on. The U.S. economy is 18 times larger than Mexico's. America buys $400 billion worth of goods from Mexico every single year. That is real leverage. The kind of leverage that, if anyone in Washington actually had the will to use it, could shift this conversation with Lopez Obrador very quickly. Kennedy was not being dramatic. He was being a realist. Then he said something that I keep coming back to. In the real world, when you fail, you get fired. In government, when you fail, you get more money. Try arguing with that. The DEA budget has grown. The fentanyl problem has grown right alongside it. At some point, you have to stop rewarding failure and start demanding results. Now look, I respect the DEA and the agents doing dangerous work every day around the world. But respect for the institution cannot be a shield against accountability. Kennedy was not asking for a war or an invasion. He was asking for a phone call. He was asking for leadership to go to the president and say, here is what will actually work. Let's make the move. What got me most was the administrator kept saying we are working every day. I don't doubt that. But working every day on something that is not working is not a solution. It is just a habit. Kennedy nailed it at the end. When something is important to you, you make it happen. When it is not, you make an excuse. That line deserves to be heard everywhere. This is not about party politics. This is not about being hawkish on Mexico. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of Americans aged 18 to 45. These are real families, real losses, and Kennedy walked into that room and said what millions of people have been thinking for years. The question he asked was fair. The leverage he described is real. The frustration he showed was completely justified. Let me know in the comments where you stand on this. Should the U.S. be pushing harder on Mexico? Do you think Kennedy's approach is the right one? I read every comment. Like the video if this gave you something to think about, and I will see you in the next one.